Hello, good morning. Welcome to Ask the Expert, which is an award-winning daily series from 8:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. to help small businesses. If you've got any questions, ask them in the comments of the live feed. If you need any more advice, then join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook. Accountants and business experts are on hand 24/7. During the live session, we'll be running a poll, so please do engage with it, and I'll reveal the results at the end. I'm Toby Mildon. I'm a diversity and inclusion consultant. I work with businesses to help them create an inclusive work environment so everybody can thrive and you can attract the most diverse talent and also keep the most diverse talent to enable your business to grow. Diversity and inclusion is in the newspaper headlines every week. What I want to do with you today is just share with you some of the most recent headlines that I've seen and just give my analysis or take on what this means for small and medium-sized businesses and how you may want to respond to it. Now, these headlines come from Human Times, which is a daily newsletter, email newsletter, covering the HR headlines that we see in the main press and the HR press every week. Now, the first headline I wanted to share with you goes, "Women from Home May Hurt Women's Careers." So Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee member Catherine Mann has warned women that their careers could suffer if they work from home for too long. Virtual platforms are way better than they were even 5 years ago, but the spontaneity, those are hard to replicate in a virtual setting, she said. Difficulty accessing childcare and pandemic-related disruption to schooling meant many women were continuing to work from home whilst men returned to the office, Mann said. There is the potential for two tracks. There's the people who are in the virtual track and people who are on the physical track. And I do worry that we will see those two tracks develop, and we pretty much know who's going to be on which track, unfortunately, she said, adding that we're not at a point yet where we can have a water cooler conversation in a virtual setting. I suppose with the clients that I've been working with over the last 18 months to 2 years, there has definitely been a disproportionate impact of the pandemic on women working in the workplace. So it's really important as an employer for you to think about how you can best support working parents in your business, particularly around flexible working, and any parental leave or parental benefits has a big impact. But as people are returning to the office, it's really important to think about how returning to the physical work environment could be impacting on them. And it's not just women, it could be people who are disabled or have a long-term health condition, for example, who might be a bit more anxious about returning to work. So think about the most flexible way that you can work in the future. You might not necessarily go back to the way that you were working previously, but if you do have groups of people that work in the office and groups of people who are working from home or virtually, think about how you can keep those lines of communication open so that people that continue to work from home are not left out on the loop on decision making and things like that. Now, I know Catherine Mann in her article said that we're not at the moment where technology can replicate those water cooler moments, but we have seen the news over the last week or so about metaverse and Facebook really spearheading that. So I am really hopeful that in the future, technology like metaverse will be able to replicate some of those water cooler moments that we benefit from in the physical work environment. So now for the next headline. The headline goes, "Businesses join government's disability employment scheme." Over 20,000 businesses, including Sainsbury's and Coca-Cola, have joined a government scheme aimed at improving job opportunities for disabled people. The Disability Confident Initiative encourages companies to improve how they recruit, retain, and develop disabled employees. Chloe Smith, the Minister for Disabled People, said that the latest disability employment figures show that we are making progress, with an additional 300,000 in work over the past year, but we remain focused on increasing this seeing 1 million more in work by 2027. Now, the government have had this 1 million target of getting 1 million disabled people into work by 2027 for quite a while now. Now, we have again seen the pandemic having an impact on disabled people over the last 18 months or 2 years. We have seen a drop in employment rates of disabled people over that period, but the figures are showing us that the employment rate of disabled people is bouncing back to pre-pandemic levels, which is good news. So this headline is really interesting because in the news article they mention a couple of big companies, Sainsbury's and Coca-Cola. But the thing is, the government disability confidence scheme has now been going for a number of years, and it works just as well for small and medium-sized businesses as it does for those large global corporations. So you can go on the DWP website. If you can just search online for the Disability Confidence Scheme, and if you are interested in making sure that you are creating a more inclusive work environment for disabled people and those with health conditions, you can actually do the first step of the scheme for free. You just need to put in your details, and they will send you information. They really provide a benchmarking tool for free where you can look at best practice for employing and retaining disabled people. The scheme focuses on how you can attract and recruit disabled candidates, and then how you can also retain and develop disabled employees that you've already got in the business. It's completely free to do. It's run by the Department for Work and Pensions, and there's plenty of information online. A lot of the clients that I work with are really surprised that they employ more disabled people than they think they do. There is an issue within a lot of workplaces where people are afraid in disclosing their disabilities for fear that it might hold back their careers, or they might face prejudice in the workplace. But we've also seen an increase in a lot of mental health conditions over the last 18 months to 2 years, particularly, which is also covered by the Equality Act as a disability as well. So even if you're interested in looking after the mental health and well-being of your staff, it's still a scheme worth looking into. So the third headline I wanted to share with you this morning was that a charity claims that top accountancy firms are racist. A report published by the Access Accountancy charity claims that white applicants are more likely to be successful when applying for jobs in the top UK accountancy firms than those from an ethnic minority or lower socioeconomic background. The report studied applications to top 10 accounting companies, including the big four firms of Deloitte, EY, KPMG, and PwC, between 2018 and 2020. For the 2019 to 2020 application round, the report found that although 48% of applicants were white, they were made up of 60% of new hires. In contrast, only 4% of hires were Black people, despite applications from this cohort making up 8% of the applications. Similarly, candidates of an Asian ethnicity, including Chinese and Arab, were significantly less likely to be successful compared to their white peers, Access Accountancy found. There's been a lot in the press, and I've spoke previously on Ask the Expert about this over the last few months, about racism in the workplace. And it's really come to the foreground because of particularly following the murder of George Floyd in the States and the increased activity of the Black Lives Matter movement that we've seen. And it's really important to understand that, racism is a systemic issue that goes back, decades and decades. And it's really important that organizations really try to think about how they can become anti-racist organizations. What I mean by that is, what can they proactively do to try to break down some of the systemic racism that we are finding in society? And that's things like access to education, access to skills development, access to work opportunities, and things like that. And it's really important that employers who actually play a really profound impact in improving equality in society through, through providing employment, do as much as they can to try and eradicate racism within our society. So the next article I want to share with you is really quite positive and encouraging. So the headline is Women and Minority Hedge Fund Pull, Women and Minority-Led Hedge Funds Pull Ahead of Peers. So Bloomberg research shows that hedge funds headed by women and minorities are outperforming their market peers, reports Hedge Week. Funds with female majority management have generated a median one-year return of 21.63, and funds with people from minorities leading the management board are up 29.59% over the same period. Hedge funds without such attributes have returned 12.7%. On a 3-year annualized return basis, women-led hedge funds have gained 10.62%. Minority-managed led funds are up 7.75%, and funds with a non-diverse management are only up 6.36%, according to the latest Bloomberg hedge fund chart book for Q3. And I think this is really interesting because there's been a lot of discussions recently about the diversity on senior leadership teams and how it can make businesses perform better. If you're interested in some of the data behind those claims, it's worth Googling the 3 McKinsey reports that they've produced over the last 3 or 4 years, where they talk about the diversity on senior leadership teams in businesses and how that can improve the business performance. And it's really encouraging to see that that hedge funds that are more diverse in their management team are outperforming those that are more homogenous or less diverse. And so it really does strengthen the business case that if we want to grow our businesses next year, if we want to have higher performing businesses, then we can better achieve that by having diverse management teams and a diverse employee base within the organization. So I'm going to take your questions now. Thank you ever so much for taking the time to write in. So the first question is from Martin on Instagram. He says that I often refer to my team and colleagues as guys during meetings, and recently HR spoke to me about this as it's not gender inclusive term. How do I respond? I don't mean it in a literal sense when I say it. Yeah, hi Martin. I absolutely completely understand where you're coming from. It's something that I do a lot myself. I'll use terms like, hey guys, how's it going? It's interesting to see, it's interesting to hear that HR have met you and why they thought that was an issue. I think for some, it could be seen as not particularly gender inclusive language. But I think it really depends on the situation. I think each team is very different. Some teams might not like to be just referred to as guys. But I think, first of all, it's worth having a conversation with your team, because actually having the conversation about what language you find inclusive and welcoming and makes people feel like they belong in the team is a good conversation to have. And it might be that your team might turn around and say, actually, yeah, when we do use language like guys, it doesn't feel particularly inclusive of everybody on the team. So I think it's worth having that conversation, but also going forward, just being quite mindful about actually the impact of language, how the impact of language can make people feel. Thanks for writing in. So Scarlett on Twitter has said, HR have asked me to do a personal statement about my coming out journey as part of an inclusion seminar they're hosting. I don't really feel comfortable. How can I say no? Yep. Hey, Scarlett, thanks ever so much for sharing that with me. Um, First of all, it is absolutely your decision and your choice alone to to whether or not to to write about your personal experiences or your personal story. Nobody can force you to do that. And I think if you aren't feeling comfortable doing that, then you might have to have a difficult conversation with HR. When I say difficult conversation, it might feel tricky and difficult to you because it's putting you in a bit of a difficult situation where you push back on them and say that you don't want to do it. And I suppose my advice and recommendation is to kind of try and link it back to the feelings that you're experiencing. So you could say something to HR along the lines of, when you ask me to do my personal statement, it makes me feel like X, Y, Z, and therefore I don't feel equipped. I don't feel comfortable. Fill in the gaps. Use the language that is most that you feel comfortable using, and just say, I don't feel comfortable doing this, and I don't, and I don't want to do it. And they have to respect that decision. They can't put you in a position where you feel that you're being forced to share a story that you don't want to share in the workplace. Good luck with that. And if you do feel like you want a bit more support, then please reach out to me on LinkedIn and we can chat offline. So a message from Alex on Facebook Messenger says that when I was a lot younger, I said some pretty ignorant things online, and every now and then it comes back. I'm a different person now. I have a better understanding and I believe in equality, but sometimes I'm scared to speak up. How can I take ownership of my past and show my commitment to inclusivity? I don't want it to be all about me. Alex, I think that's amazing. Thank you ever so much for sharing that. I think my advice is really what you've just said actually to us in your message, where you kind of recognize your former self and your beliefs and approach around equality and inclusion nowadays. And I think actually it's a really powerful story in and of itself for you to talk about your own personal journey and where you came from and where you are now. So I think, unfortunately, stuff does linger online. And if there's no way of removing it or deleting it, I think by saying, I'm a different person now, I've learned and how that experience is now informing your current worldview is actually really powerful in itself, because there are people out there currently who are putting stuff out online, which in the future might come around and bite them. And I think it's good education and a good lesson for them, but it's also a good source of support as well for people who are in the same boat as you, who have put stuff out online previously, and it's now coming around to affect them. So well done on recognizing that. I really appreciate that. And I hope that helps. John on Twitter says, my company is still quite small, but our staff is majority white. How do I go about hiring from more diverse backgrounds without it feeling like it's positive discrimination? Yep. Excellent. Thanks, John. So I just wanted to draw the distinction between positive discrimination and positive action. Positive discrimination is unlawful. However, positive action is different. Positive action is taking proactive steps to effectively try and level the playing field. So I'll give you an example. When I was working in a former company, I worked in the technology department. We were predominantly men in the division, whereas the rest of the company was about a 50-50 men and women split. So I was working to try and get more women into technology. And so what we did is we proactively took positive steps to try and encourage applications from women. So we did things like we ran technology women in technology conferences to try and encourage applications. We looked at the language that we were using in our job descriptions to see if it was off-putting for women as well. So we did a whole lot of things. So you can do positive action. So if the next time you're hiring, what you could do, for example, is reach out to local organizations and to promote the job that you've got. So I work currently with an energy company based in the northwest of England. They have struck up relationships with some local mosques, and whenever they do recruitment, they advertise for jobs through the local mosques, and they found that a really effective way of attracting more people to come and apply and work for them. So there are things that you can even do as a small business on a local level. I talked about one of the headlines, for example, around employing disabled people. Pretty much every large town and city in the UK has a disabled persons organisation. So you could just find your local organisation and then advertise for a job through them. You could do like open days. There's so much that you can do. My advice is get your team together and kind of just do a brainstorming with them. Just say, put on all the possibility thinking hat. And what I mean by that is sit your team down and go, if we want to try and attract a diverse bunch of people as possible, what are all the things that we could do to do that will cost us little to no money? Because obviously you don't need to have massive budgets to do this either. And you might be surprised with what your team comes up, as long as you at the beginning of that exercise are very clear with your team on why it's important. I've written the book Inclusive Growth, and I always link with my clients how a more diverse business can help your business grow. So you might want to say, if we have a diverse bunch of people working in the business, it will really help us grow our business, develop new products and services, whatever your business is. How can we best go about attracting as many people to come and work with us as possible? Great. So just going on to the next question. So the next question is from Adrian on Instagram. He says, where's the line between educating someone to do better versus dismissing them? I always want to give employees the benefit of the doubt and opportunity to grow if I can. I think, Adrian, I'm a big fan of kind of having a coaching approach to management. What I mean by that is to kind of just ask lots of questions or coach them. So if you've got a particular challenge in mind, or they do something that you find intriguing, let's say, and you you kind of think, that's a bit odd, and rather than kind of just brushing it under the carpet or dismissing them, is to kind of again, sometimes you have to find the right moment to do this. Is to kind of ask a coaching like question. So if it's diversity and inclusion related, it could be something like, I noticed when we had our team meeting that quite often you would talk over Jane blocks, and I'm really intrigued as to why you do that. In hindsight, that might be a bit too direct, actually, but I'm sure you'll find your own words that work best for you. But again, you can use that kind of coaching like questions or language to help have those conversations in the workplace. So the next question, thank you, it's to Bev on Facebook Messenger. So Bev says that whilst we are all remote working, we hired our first trans employee. Since we've been back in the office, one cis employee has voiced concern about sharing women's spaces. The trans employee using the same women's spaces as her. She cited things such as the recent BBC article as evidence, which I know from social media was highly contentious. What should we be doing? I think that's a really interesting question, and I can totally understand how this is a really difficult. It can be a really difficult situation. I think first of all, you need to have quite an open and honest and frank conversation with that employee about their concerns, because I think my opinion, and again this is a personal opinion, is that those concerns are unfounded. And I think what really concerns me is that they are they're citing articles in the BBC which in my opinion are transphobic. So I think you need to have an open and honest conversation with that employee about their concerns to try and address them and to try and resolve those concerns directly. You also need to support that your new trans employee as well and make sure that they get the right support. But I think if you've got particular concerns about your workplace, you probably need to get very specific LGBT or trans advice. So you might want to reach out to like a local trans organization or community to try and get some specific advice. Now, I do have trans contacts and LGBT contacts myself. So if you want to just reach out to me on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a message, or go to my website, which I'll share with you at the end of this session today, then I can direct you to people who can offer sort of more specialist and appropriate support than I can right now. So thank you ever so much for your questions. So I think we've got time for one more question, then I'll quickly reveal the poll. So Shakir on Twitter says that we do a lot of work to support charities and promote inclusivity at my business. How should we be talking about this externally? I don't want us to be accused of being performative. Really good question. I'm going to be cheeky, and I've written a book, Inclusive Growth, and in the final chapter of my book, I talk about, it's called Celebration, and that's all about how you can promote yourself and talk externally about being an inclusive place to work, and how you can do that with an authentic voice and create your inclusive employer brand. So I'm doing a shameless plug, unfortunately. So I would recommend reading the last chapter of my book, Inclusive Growth, which you can find on Amazon. So the poll results are in. In the question we asked, do you believe diversity and inclusion will help your business grow in 2022? 80% of you said yes, and 20% of you answered no. So I think that's really encouraging result to see that the majority of people believe that it will help. There is evidence out there that a more diverse employee base and management team does help a business perform better. If anything, you're reflecting the diversity of your customer base. So you make better decisions. You can create products and services that that better serve your customer base as well. Employee engagement goes up. Employees feel like they can progress in the organization, that they can do their best work. And actually, you have a better employer brand as well going forwards, which means that you have an easier job attracting talent. So if you are planning to grow next year, recruiting more people, for instance, then investing in diversity and inclusion, even if you're small and medium-sized businesses, you don't have to have a massive budget to do this stuff, can really help you. So thank you ever so much for tuning in. If you'd like to get in touch with me, then feel free to message me on LinkedIn or visit my website, www.mildon.co.uk. Coming up on Ask the Expert tomorrow is Johan Gori. He's an accountant and managing director of On Point Accounting Group. Tune in to get advice on accounting and the latest features and tools that will make your bookkeeping easier. A reminder that if you need any more advice, then join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook. You've got accountants and business experts on hand 24/7. I've thoroughly enjoyed answering your questions this morning. Have a great day. Thank you.